Hello, everyone. My name is Dawn, and thank you for joining me for another episode of A Chamber Within. I wanted to talk about unconditional love this week and how I learned it from my parents, but in vastly different ways. My mother's love was the easy and obvious lesson. She was very loving, she was a forgiving person, she sought to smooth out family quarrels and embraced others from all walks of life. This lesson was easy, to learn by her example, how she showed grace to others, kindness, compassion. The list goes on and on. A while back, I was thinking about unconditional love and how I learned it in my lifetime. Now, my mother was an example of how to receive it, right? Because she was a giver of unconditional love. But the more difficult side of that lesson or other side of the coin was how to give it. Now, this lesson is how I learned about unconditional love from my father. He showed me many hints, but also I had witnessed how angry and vengeful he was at times, how he lacked trust in others and was oftentimes a violent man when his temper would get the best of him. When I became a teenager, I suffered with depression and the pressures of adolescence and keeping my grades high, amongst other juvenile woes, right? The typical stuff. My mother passed when I was 19, which is very early into my life. And of course, I had my father a lot longer, which, I say of course because some people talk about how the easy parent dies first in their life and how they see that kind of common theme. And so that's where I get that from. So in hindsight, this definitely feels like a lesson of a lifetime, well, my lifetime. One of the most hurtful things someone has ever said to me came from him. He had found out that I was cutting my wrist from the high school social worker, and on a ride to somewhere, with him driving and my mother in the passenger seat, I was sitting in the back, and I remember him saying to me, next time you do it, you better do it right with regards to my cutting. And at that time, I thought, I should just fling myself out of this car, mostly in an act of rebellion, just to up the ante because he pissed me off. Forgive me, but from time to time, my sense of humor knows no bounds. It's a coping mechanism. I know it's a dark joke, but I feel like my humor has carried me through many situations. So I apologize if that sounds dark, but I'm like, you know what? I should just jump right out of this damn car. I'm sick of him. In my teenage mind, I'm like, that'll show him. Well, anyway, needless to say, I didn't fling myself out into the highway. I definitely stuck around and for many years harbored a negative feeling towards him, a number of negative feelings towards him. Once I had matured, and not enough, I would say, I had matured some because I became a mother at the age of 21. So once I became a mother, and my mother was no longer the intermediary for us, we had to foster a relationship that grew. And this was a different sort of relationship because it was an adult to another adult. He had developed cancer, and I moved him to my state where I lived in North Carolina from New York, where he had been living by himself. And he became very close with my daughter up until she was 9 years old, because that's when he had passed. He had passed when I was 30 years old. So I had him for quite some time after my mother had passed away. But I will say, I learned how to see past his anger throughout the years. Somehow, I had matured emotionally past the point to where he had matured. I was able to isolate the moments of his callousness and chuck it up to him being emotionally childlike. I went from anger to feeling sorry for him, and then after a solid year of meditation, late into my 30s, years after, and reflecting on all of this, I was thinking about loving him in the way that only I could once I was able to see our relationship objectively. This was how I learned unconditional love for my dad, how to be an example of it, how to give it. Yes, I'd show up for him begrudgingly when he needed groceries to his front door, even though I did not want to be there. I overlooked mean remarks he made and figured out how to ignore drunken moments of slander against people in my life that I love very much, which were family members. I had a moment of him being in and out of the hospital, and I said aloud, "Why doesn't he just die already?" I was tired and I was angry. So this wasn't um, an easy place to get to when I say unconditional love. It wasn't all roses and flowers. It was a very, very tough lesson, and I was exhausted from doing so much for so many years. I'd signed up to take care of him, but sometimes I'd be so worn out that I would show up for him because of the love I had for my mother. She would always say, "Honor your mother and father, and your days will be longer." That was one of her favorite quotes from the Bible. It was because of her I would even show up for him. He had no idea. I was angry, but knowing that he still needed me and there was no one else because he had pissed them all off too, I'd show up because there was no one else. So I didn't show up with a smile and with gratitude and all these, you know, this place I am in right now. I didn't show up like that. I showed up like, I don't want to be here, but I'm here because there's nobody else to help you. Finally, in the very end, some family came down from New York and helped out, and I was able to get a small breather when my sister also began to chip in and help out with him as well, take him to his appointments and things of that nature. He would always say, "Don't say at my funeral I was a nice guy. Tell the truth." Something to the effect of how badass he was. I can't remember what he said to say, but he was just like, "Tell the truth." And well, this is the truth. This is my truth. My lesson that I turned into a blessing. But in reality, once it was all over, I learned that through it all, I was being tested. Maybe that's not the word. I was being shaped, molding myself into the kind of person I want to be. I am human. I hurt. I forgive. I haven't given up on myself. And at my core, there is an endless well of love that exists. I have survived this relationship. This negative into positive that I learned is called transmutation. When you take a negative situation and make it positive in some way, in a way that works for you, in a way to keep your sanity. It's alchemy, right? It's us going into the darkness and then rising up out of it into the light of day. Seeing this exchange of energies from a higher template and realizing how we have changed and hopefully for the better. How have you grown? How has it affected you in your day-to-day life? These are the questions I tend to ask myself, and I'm also asking you if it's happened to you. I've learned that I'm really good with dealing with the so-called difficult people. I've learned to not let them bring me down and hear their negative words. When I see them and I know that they have just negativity to spew, I see them in a isolated bubble that is not permeating my bubble, right? That negative energy belongs to them, and I don't match it. I raise it. I raise the energy. You meet me or you don't meet me, but I'm not coming down to your level. So if you are in a place and I consider it a place I don't want to be, I don't meet you there because I don't want to go there, right? If I was to drag you somewhere, I'm there with you too, right? If I'm going to fight and tussle and drag you to hell, well, doesn't that put me in hell too? No, thanks. I don't want to go there. So that's why I say I lift. I do not match. Matching a vibe only places the other in power. And I'm not giving up my centeredness and my own personal power. I've learned that maintaining my center is a superpower. It's not spoken of very much, but I know that it works. It allows me to get past a moment I would have previously lost my peace in. So right now I'd like to read a couple pages out of the Alchemy book. It's by Paul Selig, which is a channeled text. It's actually called Alchemy. Subtitle, Book 2, The Beyond the Known Trilogy. Okay. Each of you agrees when you incarnate to have altercations of one kind or another, whether they be karmic or opportunities to learn, but an altercation can be highly positive and provide growth for all connected. To deny that growth is the challenge, and the small self will seek to do that because the small self seeks to be right. But I am right, you may say. She did this terrible thing to me. He accused me of this or that. How am I to mind my own needs in such deference to another's behavior? Here's the true challenge. What is the opportunity being claimed through each encounter that does not make anybody else wrong, does not affirm your purview of self-righteousness? What can be learned? What can be healed? When that original seed of pain that has grown into this terrible tree is dislodged and seen for what it is, the entire tree may be transformed. You may find yourself singing from its branches, lying in its shade, and knowing that it too is of God, but had been denied. The tree becomes of God because anything that is God must be of truth and can be re-known. Now, those of you who share pain, who understand yourselves through pain, who negotiate identity through pain, and the mask of pain, many of you have been delivered from the mask through these teachings. But you rely upon the pain as a currency, as a way to be in exchange with others, because that is how you have had your needs met. If you have known yourself in fear and seen the world as fearful, you may seek a protector or may seek to hide from a world that may harm you. If you have denied fear and done it in a small self way, I will not allow myself to know myself in fear. I will always be right, so I will not have the opportunity to question my own vulnerability. You may also learn from the allowance of this teaching, because you are still in fear, but protecting the self from it through the adversary that you will seek to prove yourself through. Now, in this teaching and the teaching we will bring forth as we continue, we will support you each in releasing the seed, the painful seed, the thing that has flowered or grown dark within you. It must be understood as of God, because nothing will be transformed when it is denied its true nature. But this hatred cannot be of God, you may say. The idea of hatred, which is the epitome of separation, must be understood as a form of fear. Once it is understood as fear, it can be seen as the lie that it is. Once it is known as a lie, it is redeemed. It is reclaimed. It is the offering to the upper room. The anger you hold at your brothers has been systematized by degree. A small infraction versus a large one. A small incident versus a great one. But we must tell you, they are the same. A war between two neighbors is the same as a war between two countries. A war between two friends is the same as a war between two adversaries. It is not degree as much as intent that must be understood and, in fact, reknown. When you heal the wound or the shame or the fear that may lie at the basis of the anger or need for recrimination, there is no design upon another for how he or she should be. They simply are. They simply are. They simply are. And because he or she simply is, he or she can be known in love, in respect, in the agreement that there is no human being who is outside of God's love. And when you punish another for what you think they are and have done, in fact, you are the one punished by the separation that you have incurred. I love this book. I love the series. I appreciate the reseeing of things in a divine way, in a way that is healing, in a way that there's no need to make someone else bad. Uh, it gets you out of victimhood. All of these very healing themes. But I wanted to share that because, and thinking about unconditional love, I thought it was very interesting how my mother showed me that, how to give it for just a small period of time, and then I had to, how to receive it, excuse me, and how to give it, yes, but how I showed up and gave it back to my father. Can you think of someone in your life and in an objective way without anger, sadness, or fear? Something that you've healed from, or are you in the midst of healing? This partnership or relationship that comes to mind for you is very much so a lesson. If so, who are they and what was the lesson? How have you been able to turn it into a gift by releasing them, thus releasing yourself from the pain? Please let me know. I'd love to hear from you. My email is thechamberwithin@yahoo.com. My first name is Dawn, and you can address me as such in the email. Whether it is anonymous or you'd like to be included for an interactive segment further down the line where I bring up questions that people have sent me, please let me know. If you'd like to read my awakening story, I have it listed on my Stand store. My Stand store link is stand.store/the_chamber_within. You can also find the link on my TikTok page, which is at the_chamber_within. I just wanted to also add that I am now on YouTube. If you'd like to leave a comment there or follow me, I'm really happy to have crossed the 1K download mark for my new channel. Like, I've only been doing this for maybe 5.5 months, so I'm really excited to expand. My handle on YouTube is at the Chamber Within. So thank you all for joining me again for another episode, and I hope you have a wonderful week. I definitely will be looking forward to reading your messages this week. Thank you so much. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.